Vicky comes in with the Sunday Sunshine. Once again, our vision is to reunite the African family for development. Our mission includes blazing new paths towards Africa's rendezvous with destiny, bearing witness, demanding change, crafting an African-centered agenda for change and development. All the while, honoring my moral obligation to remember. Let me tell you quickly what we've got coming up this morning. We're going to be talking about the geopolitical upheavals, the geopolitical tensions. We're focusing specifically on something that has caused or is causing grief here on the island in Jamaica, because people feel as if they're mourning. Literally, we're going through grief. The decision that was taken to end the Cuba mission here in Jamaica, the Cuba medical mission here in Jamaica. So we're going to be having a prolonged conversation about the implications of that, putting that in historical context, socio-political context, and also within the context of what's happening now in Cuba, the chokehold that the United States has on Cuba, the strangulation, the economic genocide that is being carried out on Cuba right now. Of course, we're waking up to continued wars across the world. We're looking at war in West and East continental Africa, in regions that previously we called and thought of as peaceful. So we're following this, not least of all the war in Iran, the attack on Iran. We've been telling you for a few years now that World War III will not be announced. They're not going to come out and say we are in World War III. But it's interesting because World War I and II started in a very similar way. And we've been at war. We've been having a world war for the last few years. I remember doing quite a few programs when we had that escalation in Ukraine about what that means and really what the end game was. Well, Professor Hilburn Watson reminded us last week that we talk more about objectives rather than end game. And we're paying attention to that. So we're in World War III. They haven't announced it, but we've been in it for a while. And it didn't start with Iran and the Israeli attack on Iran, Israeli-America attack on Iran. We've been in this for a while. So this is an escalation, and it's not going to stop until they have completely dismantled the old rules-based order to make way for the new world order. As a matter of fact, these two things cannot coexist. The old order cannot coexist with the order of technocracy and transhumanism that is being ushered in. One has to be completely destroyed. So this is not about winning a war. This is not about who wins. It never was, it never will be, never is. It is about completely dismantling the old order for the new world order. And go back and read Mark Carney's speech at Davos. I'm going to come back to that because there's something I want to tell you, I want to talk about. And it's a poor segue, but I really do have to get there. If you recall, we have been talking in this space and other spaces here across IRFM for at least 30 years about how Jamaica was used as a guinea pig for the injection for Depo-Provera. A lot of our mothers and grandmothers in the 80s, 70s, 70s, 80s, were used as, they weren't told that they were being used as guinea pigs, but they were used as guinea pigs for what we call the injection, the birth control method, the injection, which is Depo-Provera. It was Jamaica that they did all their tests. And it wasn't until late 2000 that some European countries and Western countries actually started using Depo-Provera. And there are still questions. But let me just tell you this quickly, because we have to come back to this at another time. But let me tell you quickly that this hormonal birth control shot, the injection, which is given every 3 months to prevent pregnancy, that there is a massive lawsuit now against the pharmaceutical company Pfizer and other pharmaceutical companies over the birth control injection Depo-Provera. The core issue, very simply put, is that it contains, this is what they're alleging, it contains a synthetic hormone called medroxyprogesterone acetate, which stops ovulation and changes the uterine lining. So the lawsuit is claiming that thousands of women are now suing the manufacturer, mainly Pfizer, and they're claiming that the drug caused brain tumors called meningiomas. Now, the lawsuits argue that long-term use of the shot increases the risk of meningioma tumors in the brain or the spinal cord. The company, according to the lawsuit, failed to properly warn patients and doctors about that risk. Women who developed tumors had to undergo brain surgery, neurological treatment, or suffered lasting complications. So there's this massive lawsuit that is underway now. A large number of these cases have been grouped into a multi-district litigation in the United States federal court so they can be handled together. So as of now, as of March 2026, more than 1,700 lawsuits have been filed. Now, once again, I'm reminding you that Depo-Provera was tested in Jamaica on our grandmothers, on our mothers. This went on for years and years and years and years without their consent, without their knowledge, and it was tied to much more that was happening in Jamaica. Hopefully I'll come back to this to talk about it, but the lawsuit started because of a 2024 study in the British Medical Journal, which found that women who used the Depo shot, the injection, for a year or longer had more than 5 times the risk of developing meningioma tumors compared with non-users. These tumors are usually benign, not cancerous, but they can still be dangerous because they grow in the brain and they cause seizures, vision problems, headaches, memory loss, neurological damage, and damage looking like like Alzheimer's or dementia, that kind of thing. So if you know anyone who's been on the injection, and this is not a scare tactic, but this is something that we have to pay attention to. We have been talking about this forever, and here we've come to a place where because of this study that's coming out of Britain, we're finding that there is serious problems with the injection. Now, there's also another thing to consider. I don't want to conflate the two. I'm going to draw a line on the injection for a minute, Depo-Provera, but also to say that there are many studies that have been done on the COVID vaccine, and the results are out there, and the results are frightening, mind-boggling, and there has been no reporting on it in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, and hardly any reporting on it across the world. Let me take a break. I'll come right back. Special guest coming online. Let me just introduce him before we go back to the phone lines. Sorry, to the ads. So, Dr. Devon Taylor is the president of JABEM. He is a senior biomedical research scientist in immunology, working in the biopharmaceutical industry in the USA. By the way, he's not coming on to talk about Depo-Provera, but he has a habit of coming in on these discussions to talk about something completely different when we are talking about pharmaceutical issues. But let me take a break and come back. Are you there, Devon? I'm not seeing you. Anyway, let me take a break.
I am here.
Oh, there you are. Well, long time no see, my friend. I'm going to come right back to you, Devon. Let me take a break.
All right.
Line, and we're going to be talking about a few issues. I want first, though, to say to Devon that I'm sure that you have been following, Dr. Taylor, the events unraveling here in Jamaica. We're all looking at Iran, but in the region, we are dealing with our own issues, not least of which is the continued stranglehold and chokehold on Cuba. Before we go into the discussions of what JABEM, the latest with the court cases, the issues regarding access to our beaches, to land and to water, give me, first of all, your initial response to the decision made by the government of Jamaica to suspend or to cancel, if you will, the medical mission, the Cuba medical mission to Jamaica, as a scientist and a medical practitioner yourself. All right. Not hearing Devon.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Just
all right.
Get off mute.
All right.
Well, it's quite an unfortunate event that, given the stress of the Jamaican healthcare system, I think this is something that the entire Jamaica not just hear about, but at some point may have experienced, either directly or through their family members, right? The pressures that the system is under, and the kind of healthcare that you receive, or quickly you receive it, that to really in the face of all of that, cancel a program. And we know, despite whatever excuses, whatever reasons were given, that it is a direct instruction from the imperial power of the United States of America.
Yeah, because we did hear the Minister of Foreign Affairs and others after her saying that this was not at the behest of the United States. Really weird way to deal with this, because this is something that the United States hasn't been shying away from. They have been going around. Marco Rubio came to Jamaica and into the Caribbean for that specific reason just recently. So it surprises me that the minister says it has nothing to do with this.
Well, I think we can be frank here. It's a disingenuous response, right? At this time, it can be no coincidence. We are really seeing what's happening globally. We've seen what is happening regionally. We have never seen the presence of the U.S. In Caribbean territory so often, participating in events, but more so, giving to Caribbean leaders their agenda, and this is how you're supposed to behave. So, I think, I'm not surprised, having seen the trend from other Latin American country, hearing what's coming out of other Caribbean islands too, or, have raised the issue of being pressured by the United States. I think Jamaica, is trying to diplomatically manage a situation that, will be hurting the Jamaican people, because when you extract, we're not talking about, I'm not sure of the numbers, but we're not talking about 10 or 20 doctors or nurses or other healthcare practitioners from a healthcare system that is stressed. You're talking about moving hundreds of them, right, without any contingency plan, right? So if the Jamaican government is claiming that this is of no pressure, then they would have proactively had a solution before you end a critical medical service by any entity to a system that is under stress, without in national security of your people opening them up to risk. without any consultation with the population that we're going to do this. You just do it, announce it, and then, the people suffer.
But it's interesting that you talk about the consultation, because if you recall when Marco Rubio was here a few months ago, that came up. The question, because he said that publicly, and journalists, one of the first questions at a press conference from one of our colleagues in the media was this very same thing: is this going to happen? And we recall the response from the Prime Minister at the time, which I think a lot of people kind of relaxed when they heard what the Prime Minister said. Of course, we were saying it was going to happen because this is what Marco Rubio wants, and this is what was going to happen. Now, so on consultation, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because we're waking up to this morning, I don't know if you saw it, but there is a press release from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, update on the decision to end technical cooperation in health between Jamaica and Cuba. Have you seen it?
I've not seen it, so...
it is vulgar. It is vulgar. Let me tell you, it is vulgar, and it is unfortunate, because what they have done... I'm sorry to interrupt you like that, Devon. But because what they have done is that they have laid out a situation where they have put the blame 100% on the victimized, oppressed people of Cuba, and government of Cuba. They have also gone as far as to agree, without saying as much, with Marco Rubio to say that this medical mission is human trafficking. They didn't use the term, but remember, Marco Rubio has been saying human trafficking. You're aware of that, right, Dr. Taylor?
I am aware of that language.
Exactly. And so now so this, I want you to look at this, and we'll talk about it another time, but the release coming overnight from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is unfortunate, disappointing, and a cruel act on the people and government of Cuba. Because what they have done in effect is they're trying to protect themselves, to protect their backs. And this is shameful, to say the least.
Well, having not read this statement, but that can only be in an attempt to calm, the backlash that the Jamaican people may unleash on the government, right? Just to put this someplace else, because I'm aware of a circulation, that the Cuban missionaries also putting out there, saying that, to the effect, this was a unilateral decision by the government of Jamaica. So the government of Jamaica now is saying that, no, it's not us, it's them, right? And
let me just read that for you, because they say, beginning in July of last year, Jamaica commenced formal discussions with the Cuban authorities aimed at restructuring the arrangement to ensure compliance with Jamaican law and international conventions, which require that workers be paid directly and have control of their travel documents. Following cabinet discussions, a formal proposal was made in October, and this was followed up by a further formal communication in December. These efforts were reinforced by direct inquiries to both former and current Cuban ambassadors, as well as informal engagements at the ministry. Then they go on to say, for absolute clarity, the government of Jamaica proposed continuation of the program with adjustments. It remains disappointed that despite these repeated efforts, no substantive response was ever received, whether verbally or in writing from Cuba. But basically, what they are underscoring is that among the issues and the concerns identified was the fact that Cuban personnel were not in possession of their own passports. Once that was brought to the government's attention, immediate steps were taken to correct it. The issue was raised with Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency, as well as the Cuban authorities locally, to ensure that all personnel were allowed to hold their passports. They also point to the fact that the medical personnel weren't paid directly, and that there were monies, something about paid in US dollar or something like that. But the very same thing that we heard from Marco Rubio is what is spelled out in this press release that we're getting overnight from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I think it is diabolical.
Yeah, and it's very clear there. I mean, this mission is going on for what? More than 30 years in Jamaica.
50 years.
50 years. I mean, I've, seen the images of Cuban doctors coming off planes, right? You are telling me, this is the time when the Jamaican government realized that they didn't have their passport in their hands, when the healthcare system is under stress and we need all that the monies was not going, all of the money was not going to the individuals, but was paid to the country. I mean, to come with these kind of excuses right now is just trying to save their own skin. Because what the Jamaican people will feel and realize, the suffering in terms of their ability to access healthcare, which is a right under the Jamaican Constitution. This country will fail to properly provide, open the country up to all kinds of risk, right? Because there'll be significant gaps. So this is trying to manage the backlash, right? And then now to align with the argument of the United States is disingenuous and really, subscribing to the imperial wish of the United States. So, listen, the government at this moment, when it should stand up and defend its people, because healthcare is a right in the country, have sided with the imperialist agenda of the United States. And it should be a shame of itself.
It should be.
Right? Our people, must really ask ourselves the question, what is it that we are going to do? Because, if one health becomes at risk, right, you already have to be waiting long time for elective surgeries. We know the response time for emergencies. We understand, listen, one of our members, Bongo had to access cataract surgery a couple weeks ago. We know the help that these individuals get from medical missions from Cuba, right? So we the people feel it. So the question is that how the people move? How do we the people move in our interests, but also find solidarity with a nation that has stood with us? Right, not only through medical aid, but through other areas, through education, through building and construction. It's the literacy of the island, and being a neighbor that while we've grown up and heard that Cuba is only 90 miles north of Jamaica. Cuba is not really 90 miles north of Jamaica, because the territorial sea, right, is 90 miles in distance, but we don't control that 90 miles. That's a shared border with Cuba. So to be honest with you, we the Jamaican people are probably only 45 miles from the territory of Cuba. And so we must ask ourselves, how are we willing to move? Because you do not leave a friend when they're on their last, the means of survival, because international power.
Kick them when they're down. This is what Pete Hegseth said about Iran just 2 days ago. This is a new foreign policy of the United States. Kick them when they're down. We can't tap into that. We can't buy into that. Devon, in the interest of time, and I'll come back to you probably next week or the week after to talk some more about this as we look at what our role, our purpose is in this geopolitical upheaval, and especially pertaining to Cuba. The JABEM has been, and these are all connected because you just talk about the territorial waters and so on. As we continue to fight for land, access to land, to sea, to the water, JABEM once again continues to lead this effort on the island. Tell us a little bit about what's happening with the court cases, because I know we announced a few days ago that there were court cases upcoming, and also what are some of the upcoming issues that we're paying very close attention to.
Yes, so, just for everyone to know, right, there are 5 cases now making its way through the court system. The pressing one right now is the Little Duns River. That case injunction was filed by the community to have Little Duns River reopened for 7 days per week. Currently, the government is officially only allowing 2-day access Saturday and Sundays, but that deprive not only the plaintiffs and the independent entrepreneurs in the space, destroying their economic livelihood, right? But it's creating a lot of social, recreational, spiritual, needs for the entire Jamaica, and that is under stress. So an injunction was filed. The hearing of the injunction started last Friday. Last Thursday in the St. Anne's Bay Court. It continues on Monday. It's going very well, but we are asking the country to really, come and give the community a support. So that is the pressing one, right? So we have Blue Lagoon is coming up, and it's so many. I have to always check my sheet here.
Yes.
We have June the 3rd, the 19th, the 22nd, 24th, September 28th, 29th, and 30th. So we have over 8 days of trial coming up starting in June for the Blue Lagoon. That's a very important one because, of course, 2 government agencies, the Jamaica National Heritage Trust and the Post and Municipal Corporation have indicated that the country does not have any prescriptive rights to the Blue Lagoon. And so this will be a very important trial because the 2 government agencies have now announced that we have no right to the Blue Lagoon and we're facing them down in the courts. We have Marmy Bay coming up again. So that Marmy Bay is going to be the 15th of June is when we go back into St. Anne's Bay Court to deal with the Marmy Bay case. There's a component of the Marmy Bay case that also resides in the Court of Appeals, and that we are waiting another trial date for that one. Then the last one is the Providence flanker, right? Which
a very vexing one. They're all vexing, but this is extremely egregious.
This one is, takes the cake, right, if you will. We go there on May the 5th. But what is happening tomorrow, right, that is related to the flanker case is that there's an EIA addendum that was done by Sanders Regional International.
And this is an environmental impact assessment.
Right.
EIA.
Yes. Now, the case filed against, not Sanders, because Sanders is not the property owner. File against the Airport Authority, Commissioner of Land, and Lee Cap Riviera, a private entity that owns property adjoining the foreshore, that we would want to protect our prescriptive rights, access to the sea. But not only so, there is a fishing channel, right? A boaters channel that is the Sanders plan to build an overwater bungalow. 18 bungalows in the sea and 10 villas at land would block the customary fishing channel that the community along the Montego Bay coastline and Jamaica uses. And so we have filed, and this is the first case that we are aware of in Jamaica that filed to protect a part of the sea, because the Jamaican government now starting to privatize property that belongs to the Jamaican people, right? I know it is vested in the crown, but it's actually our property. And they want to give away, as they have done so, right, already, to Sanders for their royal plantation, for White House. They have done it for Princess Sense in the mangrove, and there are a couple more other entities that have applied for privatization of the sea. And now this is a escalation in terms of the dispossession. And so this is a very, very critical case.
And we have to underscore what this means for fisher folk in Jamaica, because when you're taking, we talk about access to the ocean, access to the beach, access to the water, but now we have a new way of doing things in Jamaica, which is building in the sea. And without, it appears to me, tell me if I'm wrong, without due consideration, which is why you have this in court, Jabem have this in court, without due consideration to the people of Jamaica, it seems to me as if we have crossed a red line.
Yes, we have crossed that red line, and it is without consultation because, listen, we're not talking about, building a dock, right? Something that is in the national interest of the country. We're not talking about building a pier, right? We're not talking about infrastructure that can benefit the nation. We're talking about building a structure over water that gets an exclusive license for the water and for the floor of the sea, right? Not for a 1 year, but as I understand it, these are 25-year renewable leases to the water that no one, if you're not paying money, which these hotel rooms are over $6,000 a night, $3,000 a night, right? And, they could correct me if I'm wrong. To stay in these spaces, you will never be able to really use that space again. And we think this requires real consultation with the Jamaican people about stuff like this, because it is appropriation. It is taking away the sea from the Jamaican people and giving it to a private entity, right?
Or
for the
private entities.
Enrichment, without the consultation.
Or private entities, because you have just pointed out that it's not just one entity, that there are other applications on the table.
There are other applications. Sanders Resort International has another application for their Miami Bay, Duns River property. We know that, Paradise Park in Westmoreland, in Simsfield, Westmoreland, also have gotten approval to build on 1,120 acres of the Dean Valley watershed that constitute 5 rivers, that they are also going to clear over 4 acres of the mangrove there to build their development. We know that Moon Palace, that is building the township there in Success, they're also going to build overwater bungalows. So what we're seeing across the country, it's not a one-off. We're seeing a pattern, right, with 3 of these in the Jamaican water, and a pattern to build out more. And we know that many other hotels who have interest in Jamaica want to build these. So now we have practically lost the foreshore with only less than 1% access to the coastline of the country, to now be losing the sea. Now, this is we're losing the sovereignty of the country. Right? We understand the importance of water to culture, to life, to liberty, right? And these need to be things, just as how the medical mission and how that impact the rights of the Jamaican people should be a consultation with the Jamaican people. The right to give away the sea for private interest should be in consultation with the Jamaican people, and this is not happening. And I say to the Jamaican people this morning, right? It may be the fisher folks who are on the front line of the struggle, but make no doubt about it, this is inextricable link to the survival of the nation, because the sea remains the only source of wild food in Jamaica. We see economic issues that are reaching the world right now, right? And people will be needing the sea for many things. Right? As a
matter of fact, it's interesting that at a time when the World Economic Forum, Davos, the United Nations, the Africa Union, and all these international global agencies have named this year 2026 as the year of water, underscoring how critical water is to ongoing survival. When artificial intelligence cannot survive without large bodies and access to large amounts of water, that we in Jamaica find ourselves ceding our water to these very same global elites. That is a conundrum.
We need a longer time to unpack these kind of things, because what we also you talk about privatization, right? We could see that the push here to put the strain on the healthcare system is to privatize the healthcare system in Jamaica too. We have seen that model in the United States, where many hospitals are privatized, right? And so if government cannot operate them, we know this is going to benefit private doctors in the Jamaican system as well. So they're also going to get rich off, the health state of the Jamaican people. They are already getting rich off it because most of the MRI and the tests are not done by the hospital system.
And this is the point I was going to raise you. How much of this has already been privatized in terms of the healthcare system? Remember, just a few months ago, I think it was last year, we were talking, and I'm totally out of time, Devon, I'm so sorry, but we were talking about how a large part of the healthcare system was being privatized to one of the most racist persons we know in the United Kingdom. So this person is responsible for his company for the data, biometric data, you name it, the data gathering, and has all of our information.
Yes.
And this is what it is right now. We have to look also to see the extent to which Israel might be involved in some of these. These are some questions that we have to pose, ask, but get them answered.
We need to get them answered. We're seeing this big proliferation, right, of privatization, right?
Yes.
Big capital, right?
Yes.
And this is, again, is capitalism unchecked. Right,
yes.
Unleash upon us on the sea and on land. And these are linked struggles that the Jamaican people need to move. Now, it's how we move. And that is my big issue right now. Jabem moves collectively with the Jamaican people to be fighting against this dispossession, the displacement and the disempowerment of our people at the coastline. Right? I'm asking how we are going to move right, against, putting our health at risk, right? That is how we now have to move. And the struggle must be rooted in the leadership of grassroots Jamaica, right? To say to our government and figure out how we can support the Cuban people as other nations are doing across the world. We're seeing other nations are moving flotillas, moving things into Cuba. Remember, Jamaican people, we are only technically 45 miles from Cuba. We must not let our brothers so close to us who have been linked to us against the struggle, right, on the planet against neocolonialism, against capitalism, imperialism. We have seen the work that the Cuban people have done on behalf of African liberation in several African countries. That is a choice made by that leadership, right, to send their people, thousands of miles across the planet to help, right, armed struggle, right, medical struggle, educational struggle, to make us more aware, liberated and free. We must not turn our back right now. And so we, the people, have a responsibility to our neighbors, but also in our interest of our health survival.
Thank you so much.
We must seize this moment and respond.
Back to the phone lines to speak to my next very special guest, Professor Horace Campbell. Professor Horace Campbell is a peace and social justice activist. He's no stranger to the Africa Forum. He is also a professor of African American Studies and Political Science at Syracuse University and chairperson of the Global Pan-African Movement North American chapter. He is the author of a book that we have read in the Running African Book Club. As a matter of fact, it is still number one on our list here in the Running African Book Club, Global NATO and the Catastrophic Failure in Libya. Professor Horace Campbell, thank you so much for joining us again inside of the Africa Forum. It's a pleasure to not just talk to you, but also to see you this morning as we speak with you.
Bill Campbell, good morning.
Well,
and it is good to be back on KHERU-FM. It's been such a long time that I've been with you.
True.
And our folks in Jamaica. So much has happened since I was last here. The most important thing that will happen was the important class struggle against the Jamaican people with Melissa.
Oh.
That was a very important class struggle.
Yes.
Because Melissa attacked the poorest of the poor in Jamaica.
Yes.
And Melissa was a warning. I want to send greetings to all my brothers and sisters in the western part of Jamaica who suffered and who showed their resilience and who are grappling with how to reconstruct their society and their environment. So it's been a long time. As usual, when I come on this program, I say hail up to my brethren and sisterin who I have not talked to. Some of them have passed since I was here last time, like Natty gone.
Our condolences.
So, Natty Rob. So, then Brother Neville, who was there, and Verna, they're listening early in the morning. Brother Richard Small and Brother Rupert Lewis, all my brethren who have been on the front line for a long time. So I cannot come on your program, Cabo, without giving greetings to the people. And thank you for the introduction.
And thank you so much for that.
We need to remind our people that we are a people who have come through very, very long tribulation. But the tribulation was never able to take away our spirit. And there are a group of people in Jamaica who created a new spirit. And that spirit is called the spirit of Rastafari. Rastafari have two basic principles. Which they have delivered to the world. And we want to bring them back to the world. Principles are peace and love. Now, how do you communicate these ideas of peace and love in an era of confusion, war, destruction, disrespect for human life? They call it artificial intelligence, but it's nothing artificial about it. It is about capital taking away the brains of people for people to make more money. So Rastafari talk about levity. No, but we're not talking to Rastafari in Jamaica. We're talking to everybody. We're talking to Rastafari. We're talking to sinners. We're talking to believers. We're talking to everybody this morning because at a certain moment in human society, people have to stand up. Now, the reason I go back to Rastafari is because they have long vision.
Yes.
In 1935, when the Italian fascists invaded Abyssinia, country that is now called Ethiopia, poor people from their villages in Jamaica said, fascism cannot stand. And we identify with His Imperial Majesty. We identify with the sovereign of Abyssinia, and we oppose to Italian fascism. From the poor people in the villages, poor people in their collective and communes, intellectuals stood up and had the international African mobilization against fascism. In other words, the poor people from our society have stood up against enslavement, have stood up against fascism. And for the young people who think fascism was just something coming out of the head of Adolf Hitler, we must understand that this is a phenomena that arises in the capitalist system when the capitalist system is in crisis. They want to bring fascism back to the world, but the Jamaican people from 1935 to 1938 stood up. My mother used to tell me that in those days, people used to use crocus bag to make underwear. This was the hard time. It was precisely at that moment that the people created organizations, societies, movements, cultural forces to register independence in Jamaica. Today, we are facing a similar crossroad where there are forces wanting to bring fascism into the world. But we know they cannot win. But in the short time while they're trying, they're going to bring a lot of destruction and bangarang on the people.
And I hear you saying, Prof, that Jamaica has faced fascism face on over decades, over time, and that the answer or the solution to how we move forward is within ourselves and within our own resistance to fascism over time.
Well, I want to just underline that there's a spirit inside of the people of Jamaica. It is something that is intangible. It is something that comes from Jackie and Nanny. It is something that comes from Sam Sharp. But those are people, you give them names. Yes. We don't want to talk about big names. We want to talk about the ordinary women and men and children who go out and plant the yam and chop the wood and dig the soil and build the house. We want to talk about the spirit among the people. It's a spirit of survival. Mm-hmm. One Rastaman put it to song. It says, we are the survivors.
Yes.
One Rastaman took the spirit of Rastafari.
The black survivors.
Spirit of Rastafari was taken to song to one of the most popular form of cultural affirmation in the form of reggae. But those cultural leaders in the 1960s who took reggae and the sayings of the Jamaican people came out of a society where the poor people from 1935 asserting their right to their humanity. So, Marcus Garvey, Bob Marley, these are our ancestors. Louise Bennett. Mm-hmm. But we're not saying anything special about Jamaica. Jamaicans are just one group of human beings. But it so happens that the special circumstances that they put us in, because one thing that I will not go on talking about, paying respect to the people who Jamaica belong to.
Yes.
The Taino people.
The Taino.
Because we walk around Jamaica and talk about Jamaica this and Jamaica that. But genocide was carried out in Jamaica before enslavement. Mm-hmm. And if we abandon the idea about what formed the Jamaican community, the history of the Taino people, the history of the people fighting against enslavement, then we are lost. And people who are lost can be manipulated. What the brother was saying this morning, I came on and heard him talking about water.
Yes.
I said, what you're saying to me? Jamaica? They call it Jamaica the land of wood and water. And they're privatizing the water and so Jamaicans are going back to a new form of slavery.
Oh yes. We have lost access to a lot of our fresh water, most of our beaches, and now we are losing access to the ocean itself in terms of even coming in by boat on the ocean. This is that is not outrageous. That is more than scandalous. And the question is, do we have teachers in school, preachers in churches, and political leaders who are going to stand up to this loss of the rights of the Jamaican people? It is a question. And it's not to the politician, because the politician at this time, in the face of the political leaders in the United States of America, we must feel sorry for them. What do you expect Holness to say when he's standing beside Rubio? Holness can say one thing in St. Kitts at the CARICOM conference, but when he's standing beside Rubio and Trump in the United States, we must feel sorry for him. And Mr. Holness and the politician must have some humility about the present political conjuncture in the world. Prof, I'm going to take a break, and when I come back, I want to pick up right here. What's the reality of the present political conjuncture in the world, and how are we to understand that? Let me take a quick break. To a very special guest, a member of the family, a mentor, and a guide over the years to this program, Professor Horace Campbell. We're looking at, yes, geopolitical issues, but we're situating that within the Caribbean, regional, and of course, continental African context, Professor Horace Campbell has been writing about this Africa's debt to Cuba, for example. Is an article that you can find well written, well resourced, well researched, and get to the heart as an understanding, if you will, a much better understanding of why we are obligated, not just continental Africa, but as African people, to pay attention to Cuba. It's in Pambazuka. Please go and check it out. Immediately you can do that, because we're going to be talking about it later on this morning. Professor Campbell, as we went into the break just now, you talked about the politicians who are impotent, if you will, powerless, it appears, in the face of American imperialism. You say we are to be sorry for them. But as we wake up this morning, we're waking to the reality that Jamaica has cancelled the Cuba medical mission, which means so much to so many of us here in Jamaica. Italy had faced the same problem and didn't cancel. What's the difference between Jamaica and Italy in that regard? But we're also waking up to Cuba saying how disappointed it is at this development, and pointing to the 50 years of a partnership in medical and health with Jamaica. And then overnight, we see a response again from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs saying, if I am to put it in a word, Marco Rubio was right. There is human trafficking here. And I know I'm going to get kicked for this, but this is basically what it's agreeing with Marco Rubio. The payments weren't made directly to the workers. They didn't have their passports. This is what he said, and this is what he meant when he talked about human trafficking. You mentioned the Prime Minister at CARICOM. He said, well, we must be in solidarity. Caribbean leaders have to have solidarity with Cuba. That, for many, was a glimmer, if you will, of hope. But the day after that, we wake up to the cancellation of the Cuba medical mission, and yet we must feel sorry for them.
Yes, we must feel sorry for them, because they're in a trap. They're in a trap, not of their own making. They're in a trap because of how the Caribbean is integrated in the current world economy. The number one economic survival of the Caribbean comes from the work of the Caribbean workers and small farmers and peasants and traders. That's the number one basis of the Caribbean economy. But another factor of the Jamaican and Caribbean economy used to be agriculture and fishing.
Yes.
It's not that anymore.
True.
It is something called tourism. And because they have organized our economy on a special kind of tourism, it means that the economy is particularly vulnerable to bad press and bad media in North America, Europe, and Canada.
Yes.
So if the politicians do not have advisors and have economists who are advising them about strategies, how to handle the present Trump administration, Canada, the Prime Minister of Canada, the neighbor to the United States, a big industrial rich country, has stood up at the World Forum in Davos and says there's a rupture. So can the Canadian Prime Minister have seen it? Or the Jamaican Prime Minister, the St. Kitts Prime Minister cannot say that. But if you cannot say that, what do you do in your society? So you mobilize your people, you organize your people, and you draw from the strength of your people to draw from what is going on in the United States of America. So we're not sorry for them because we want to help out the present government. We're sorry that they do not have thinkers and planners and strategists in the government who are thinking of the changes that are going on in the world. We should be lobbying the Jamaican population in New York, in Washington, in California, to make sure their congressional and Senate representative put pressure on Rubio against what they're doing to the Cuban and Jamaican people. That's what I meant by I feel sorry for them, because the Jamaican government does not really understand how much pressure is coming down on the rest of the world because of the present leadership in the United States. The leadership in the United States of America have decided that they will ignore international law. What we mean by international law? At the last World War, when there was fascism, when Mussolini invaded Abyssinia, Ethiopia, when the Germans invaded other countries and killed 100 million people, including 6 million Jews, the world came up with a body called the United Nations. Mm-hmm. And the first line of the Charter of the United Nations is the respect for the international law and sovereignty of countries.
Yes.
In 1945, when they established the United Nations, Jamaica was not an independent country. In 1948, when they established the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Jamaica was not an independent country. They did not recognize the human rights of Jamaican people. But it was part of the global struggles for international law, international human rights, that Jamaica joined with Africans, Asians, Latin America to make the world a safer place for poor working people. The United States has abrogated international law. They went into Venezuela. They kidnapped the president of Venezuela. They have taken Venezuelan oil, selling Venezuelan oil through Qatar. The United States of America have invaded and attacked Iran. The United States of America and Israel killed the Ayatollah Khamenei, a spiritual leader in the month of Ramadan, in the month of the feast of people fasting for Easter. The United States of America is having blockade against the people of Cuba. They've said they want to take over Panama. They want to take over Greenland. They want to take over Canada. So we are at a stage going back to 1945 where the Jamaican people, not the government, have to stand up for international law, have to stand up for the dignity of black people, and have to stand up for the health and safety of the people. When you talk about Jamaica and Cuba, that transcends government. My grandfather worked in Camagüey province in Cuba. Nearly every Jamaican family have a family member from Cuba. So when we're talking about Cuba and Jamaica, we're not talking about diplomacy. We're talking about our family. So the support for the Cuban people at this particular moment is like getting up and supporting people for Melissa. In other words, all throughout the Caribbean, we have benefited. The Prime Minister of St. Lucia studied in Cuba. Now, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia got his medical degree from Cuba, but Prime Minister of St. Lucia cannot tell the United States, we are going to stand against you. He has to find ways with the St. Lucian people to say all of the people who benefited from Cuba health and education must stand up.
What does this stand-up look like? Collectively, I hear you. What does the stand-up look like, Prof? Because we're getting, now this is on the ground here in Jamaica, palpable fear. And some people don't even know what they're afraid of. But there is inherent in all of that a fear of losing access, a fear of a Venezuela situation, or, God forbid, an Iraq situation. The Shield of the Americas that happened yesterday, that meeting that happened yesterday in the United States. Trinidad is at the table, but look at the stance.
Where they look at how they treated her at the table.
Well, there you go.
They see the optics.
I saw the optics.
See the optics
yes.
of that meeting.
Yes.
But who was in that meeting? In other words, let us not get carried away. Was Brazil in that meeting?
True.
With nearly 200 million people?
Not at all.
Was Mexico at that meeting?
No.
With nearly 200 million people? Was Colombia at that meeting? The point about the media, we should not be carried away. In 1935, when Italy invaded Abyssinia, the poor people in Jamaica did not wait for governments to act. They acted in their villages. What do we do in our schools, our churches, our communities, our lodges, our universities, our teachers training colleges to help the Cuba? We are not powerless. Cabo, the way you've taken the initiative this morning to have this program on Cuba, how many people in churches are lifting up prayers to their relatives in Cuba? In other words, when you go to church, who are they praying for? Mr. Trump and the fascists in the United States of America? Are you praying for your brothers and sisters who suffered from Melissa? Are you praying for your brothers and sisters and your cousins in Cuba and in Iran? So when we talk about solidarity with Cuba, we're going back to the kind of solidarity that we mobilized to fight for independence. Mm-hmm. When I was a boy in Jamaica, I went to school. And in my high school, my teachers were people who supported independence. Mm-hmm. So they did not wait for a political party to tell us about the struggle of Nanny and Sam. What are the teachers doing in school in Jamaica? Let me give you an example, Cab.
Can I ask you
How
to
many
hold...
Jamaicans...
Oh, no, let's finish the sentence.
Make
yes.
this point.
Yes.
Cab. How many Jamaicans know about Kutukuna Valley?
It's hardly taught in school unless you're doing specific history and unless you choose to answer a question on Cuba or Angola. It doesn't come up because it's not taught.
But how many students in the United States in Jamaica know about the fight in Europe against fascism and Normandy? They teach them that.
They do.
They teach them about Europe,
yes.
But they don't teach them about Africa and Cuba.
Yes. Why is that?
Well, that's because we don't have an educational system to serve our people.
Let me take a break.
That is why I'm making this call to the teacher training colleges and the teachers. We're not calling on government this morning. We're calling on normal citizens to do what they can and do everything they can to have solidarity with themselves.
Yes.
But when you solidarity with yourself, you have solidarity with Cuba. Because Cuba is your neighbor, is your cousins, is your uncles.
Is our grandfather. Hold the line for me, please, Prof. Line, Professor Harris Campbell. And we're looking at, in this segment of the program, talking about our strengths, talking about the fact that we are not impotent, that it is from the grassroots that we're going to see change and that we can effect change. And we're talking about this within the context of Cuba, but also the geopolitical tensions around us right now. Professor Campbell, I know I interrupted just as we were going to the break and you were asking some really poignant questions about our education system. I want to go there, but you asked specifically about how many know about Cuba's role, for example, in Angola, liberation role in Angola, on the continent of Africa, not just Angola. And I want you to go there for us to help us to understand, because you have been writing about this, also talking about Africa's debt to Cuba. Help us to understand what that is and the role that Cuba has played and continue to play in liberationary movements.
Okay, thank you very much. This is something very close to our heart. Jamaica and Jamaican people, when they joined the United Nations in 1962 as an independent country, Jamaica was at the forefront of opposing apartheid. That's the system of white supremacy in South Africa that took away from the rights of ordinary South African workers and poor people and black people, and exploited them and plundered the country. The people of Southern Africa, Angola, Namibia, Botswana, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, fought against apartheid. When they were fighting against apartheid, they were fighting on many fronts. The first and most important was the people in the streets, like the children of Soweto, fighting with their liberation leaders. And the liberation leaders were mostly in jail. Like Nelson Mandela was in jail for 27 years. Secondly, there were liberation movements. Thirdly, there was the frontline states of Tanzania, Angola, Mozambique. But most importantly, it is the battles to militarily defeat the South African military. The South African army had killed 2 million people in the region of Southern Africa. They had created $80 billion in damage in the region. And they had invaded Angola in 1987 during the period of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. They were going to go to take over Luanda to reverse the independence of Angola. And the peoples of Angola reached out to the Cubans who had helped them in 1975 to fight for their independence. And at the Battle of Cutuconavale, that went on from 1987 to 1988, the Cubans and the Angolans and the liberation movements of SWAPO and the ANC decisively defeated the South African military forces. And when they were defeated, the United States stepped in to negotiate for the withdrawal of the South African army. And it is at those negotiations that we saw the independence of Namibia, the unbanning of the liberation movements, and the release of Nelson Mandela and other freedom fighters. So the Cubans had sent 33,000 soldiers and international fighters. Hundreds and thousands of Cubans died for the independence of Namibia, the sovereignty of Angola, and for the unbanning of the ANC. Every school child in the Caribbean, in the world, should know of this sacrifice of the Cuban people. That is not to speak of the hundreds of thousands of Cuban doctors, health workers, agronomists who have helped in Angola, Algeria, Mozambique, South Africa, Tanzania, the Congo. So the Cuban society became a superpower when it came to health and healthcare, because it dedicated its society for the well-being of human beings. These are basic facts that every one of our children should know, just as how we teach them about Nani and Sam Sharp and Paul Bogle, because Cutuconavale changed the history of Africa. As Fidel Castro says, the history of Africa is written before Cutuconavale and after Cutuconavale. There would have been no unbanning of the ANC and ending of apartheid without the sacrifices of the Cuban people. So now the Cuban people sacrifice for us in global Africa. What are we doing in return? Are we going to quibble between before a little well, in Jamaica, so a boy called Rubio? No, look at Trinidad. The leader of the opposition in Trinidad came out and said, Mr. Rowley said that what the Prime Minister of Trinidad is doing is not right. The Prime Minister of Trinidad has gone against the principles of Eric Williams about non-alignment. Where is the opposition leader in Jamaica? What are they saying about Cuba?
Well, we just heard
non-alignment of the people.
Yeah, to be fair to them, we just heard, and I heard it on the on TVJ News last night. I'm sure Aaron might have carried it, but I was watching TVJ News last night, and I heard a report from Donna Scott Motley, who I think is a spokesperson for Foreign Affairs, where it's the strongest I'm hearing so far coming from the opposition. I don't know if we'll hear anything else, but basically there is a challenge there. Also from Dr. Dawes, I think, has said something. But as you know, in St. Kitts, the Prime Minister of Jamaica also talked about solidarity with Cuba and what that meant. So they're all quibbling in front of this little boy, Marco Rubio, as you said. Prof, I have coming into me probably 16 or 17 messages from academia. And they're all challenging me because basically they're saying that in high school in Jamaica, at grade 9, students are taught the relationship between Cuba and Jamaica. And then others are saying at the University of the West Indies in the Department of History and Archaeology, Cuban history is covered in international relations. But I want to say something about that because my daughter, who is still in high school, went through grade 9, did history, and Cuba was a choice. She didn't have to study Cuba. It was a choice on the syllabus. So, and this is the point we're making, that it is not compulsory. You can choose this. So some answering, reading and answering that.
Well, let me say to you, Kabu, that you are a very powerful force in Jamaica because the professors in the university have to answer you on your show on real time. And if the professors say in real time that they're teaching about Cuba in the university, we'll say, good for you. We thank you, and I am not following the curriculum in Jamaica, so I stand to be corrected if I made an error. But the point is, it needs to be more generalized. In other words, it needs to go to a teacher trainers college.
Yes.
We have needed to go down at the lowest level. So yes. I stand to be corrected because I cannot speak about the curriculum authoritatively in Jamaica. So thank you for that correction.
I'm going to take a quick break. Hang on. What do we do from here? Where do we go from here? How do we, as the grassroots that you're talking, how do we move from here to assist Cuba, in Cuba itself, and tangible in terms of the economic chokehold that Cuba now, that the U.S. now has on Cuba?
There are many levels. And the first is to go back to the spirit that we talked about. What spirit is moving the people right now? This is not academic. This is not about politicians. What is the spirit of survival for the Cuban people and the people of the Caribbean? And that spirit will move you to do many different things. There was a speaker on before I came on.
Dr. Devon Taylor, yes.
Raising support for Cuba and mobilizing support. You are not very far away from Cuba, 45 miles away. How do you mobilize resources, even in the face of the challenges in Jamaica? How do your schools and your churches and your communities support the flotilla and tell the people who are coming with the flotilla they can land in Jamaica, and tell the people in Angola and Tanzania they can fly some beans to Jamaica and the flotilla will pick up in Jamaica and Barbados and go to Cuba? That is at the basic level where your community is. But there is also at the level of international politics. What are we saying about Cuba in CARICOM? Are we having a discussion about the technical basis for Cuba becoming a full member of CARICOM and being defended politically, legally, and diplomatically by CARICOM? Now, Haiti is a member of CARICOM. I don't see any reason why Cuba should not be in CARICOM, and we should be starting the discussion on this. Thirdly, the Jamaican diaspora, that is, I don't like that word, but the Jamaican overseas in Colombia, San Andreas, Jamaican diaspora in Costa Rica, Jamaican diaspora in Cuba, Jamaican diaspora in United Kingdom, in the United States of America. These are very important constituencies of Jamaica that should be joining with Jamaica on this question of Cuba. Just take the United States of America. There are so many children of Jamaicans in important positions. Let's take, for example, the head of the Congressional Black Caucus, Yvette Clarke, from Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. Brooklyn is another Jamaican community. Why do we not have Yvette Clarke on IRI FM and have the Congressional Black Caucus taking a firm position to support Jamaica and the Caribbean against the sanctions against Cuba? So
very good. Very good point.
I'm suggesting that there are many things we can do. And the last point I want to make is about the churches. We have people who call themselves Christians in Jamaica. But last time I was talking to a friend of mine, colleague of mine, teaches in Florida. He came to speak at my university. And I asked him, what are the churches in Jamaica saying about this attack on Iran? And he said to me, the churches in Jamaica follow Billy Graham more than they follow Martin Luther King. This is a challenge on this Sunday morning. If you're following Billy Graham in Jamaica, you're following white racists who want to take away the rights of black people in the United States of America, want black children in the United States of America not going to school. So the churches who are praying this morning and offering supplications to God to bless them must ask themselves, Martin Luther King is against racism, apartheid, the oppression of the Palestinian people. So the churches, the Jamaica Baptist Union must make a statement about this thing. The Presbyterian Church, the Roman Catholic Church. I know the Pope does not support what the United States of America is doing. So in every section of our population, we must raise our voices against this outrage against the Cuban people and against the Caribbean people. You cannot abduct the president of Venezuela, violate international law, and the Prime Minister of Trinidad rise up and say something. And the last point I want to make is about Rastafari. Rastafari mansions cannot be quiet and silent on what is going on in Cuba. In the movement for social justice in the Caribbean, there's a statement made by Rastafari organizations in the Caribbean, along with the organization of the oil field workers trade union and other workers in the movement for social justice. What are Rastafari mansions saying? We talk about churches, we talk about schools, we talk about universities. Rastafari cannot stand apart from this current challenge to the sovereignty of human beings.
To the church, Prof. Isn't this for the church a moment, well, it's a conundrum, it's a conflict, because you're talking about the very same information that's coming out of the United States and the very same points being raised by some in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, and the United States Army, and also out of the political spaces, which is to say, this is the fulfillment of prophecy. This is leading to Gog versus Magog. This is the end times. Doesn't the church now find itself in a trap? This is Christianity versus Islam. The church obviously is taking the side of Christianity, which is the church. And that's it. Well, generally speaking, the evangelicals, this is prophecy.
But we have broken the church before. In other words, when the slave masters came to Jamaica and say and quote Songs of Solomon chapter 1 verse 5 and 6 and Ephesians and say black people should be slaves, did we as black people say that we accept the Christian preaching of the British church? Sam Sharp was a preacher. Paul Bogle was an assemblyman in the church. Every one of those who are fighting against racism in the United States of America, every major rebellion in the United States was led by Christian people, because Christianity is about freedom and human dignity. So if we have people who are licky, as they say in Jamaica, and want some handout from the white racists, and they call themselves evangelical, and they join, can you imagine that you kill the Ayatollah in the month of Ramadan? And when you kill the Ayatollah, you say the God of Israel and the God of the United States is better than the God of
Iran,
Islam. No, this is not Christianity. This is devil worship. And devil worship is worshiping white supremacist ideas. So from the beginning, Nani, Sam Sharp,
yes,
Paul Bogle, Marcus Garvey, Rastafari, even our current political leaders in Jamaica. I grew up in the church in Jamaica. As a little boy, I went to the church, and the church is called the Calvary Baptist Church. The Calvary Baptist Church was started by the children of Sam Sharp. And most people don't know this history. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about religion, the Jamaica Baptist Union and Calabar College was started as a place to train Jamaicans who oppose white racism. So when you have in the church in Jamaica,
yes,
people who say they support Donald Trump and they call themselves evangelical, these are just plain capitalists, bootlickers, who want to oppress their people. And those people should be exposed.
I think it is good that, yes, and I think it's good that you have laid this on the table this morning, that we're calling this to order. It's important for us to face this one thing at this critical time. And maybe, just maybe, hopefully, all Christians who are listening this morning, just before you head out to church, because I'm getting your text, I know you're all listening, maybe when you go in this morning, the conversation will be a little bit different. Thank you.
Can I just add one point?
Yes.
Because I reflect on my boyhood in Jamaica. I was listening to Rastafari in the street corner, and I was going to a church called Calvary Baptist Church. They brought Billy Graham to the church. At that point, I did not know that Billy Graham opposed Martin Luther King. It's only later on that I understood this, that my church was supporting white racism.
Yeah.
And I'm saying we do not want our children to grow up in a church in Jamaica with evangelicals bringing white racists, just as how I was brought up and was being told that Billy Graham is a great leader who called us to prayer. And Billy Graham was supporting those who are oppressing black people. We now have the tradition of Martin Luther King, a man of peace, a man of love, a man who opposed war and militarism. It is time the church leaders in Jamaica wake up. In the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope this morning is supporting all of the people of Cuba and Latin America. The Pope is not supporting the United States. And this is a point that Jamaicans must understand. Jamaicans are migrants. We have migrated all over the world. The Pope is against what ICE is doing to poor immigrants in the United States of America. And Jamaicans cannot be silent on what ICE is doing against people and picking them up. In my university, one of our basketball players, who's from the Sudan, was picked up this week by ICE, and we have to be mobilizing. So there's nowhere we can be quiet on whether it is on immigration, whether it's on Cuba, whether it's in Iran, whether it's on education, whether it's on health. There's no way we can be silent at this moment. We have to stand up to be counted.
We're going to leave it there, Prof. I think it's a powerful note on which to wrap. Thank you so much as usual. You're going to come back hopefully next week when we talk a bit more about Iran. By then we'll know a whole lot more too. But as usual, thank you so much for your knowing, for your knowledge, and for sharing with us in this space.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the discussion on Iran because I want to explain to Jamaica why they must now start thinking of moving their currency out of the US dollar. Because this war in Iran is because there was a crisis of the UN's financial system. And I want to be able to come again. So thank you so much, Kabu.
Definitely.
And to my brethren and sister in Jamaica, one love.
And we'll see you next week. Inside of the space. Thank you so much. Professor Horace Campbell, a peace and social justice activist. He's also a professor of African American Studies and Political Science at Syracuse University. He's the chairperson of the Global Pan-African Movement, North American chapter. He's the author of Global NATO and the Catastrophic Failure in Libya. A quick break. Educator with expertise in development studies, gender studies, and cultural memory. She earned her bachelor's degree in communication with language and literature from Carmack, University of the West Indies, and later completed her master's in women and development studies and PhD in development studies at the International Institute of Social Studies, Erasmus University in The Hague. And do we have her online? Is she there? I'm not seeing you, Dr. Imani Tafari Amma. Yeah, I'm all up. Okay. Imani, tell me where you are and if you are just about to join us. So she's writing in today's paper, and I've been reading that. We want to talk about that. She's looking at Cuba, but also from the perspective, it's International Women's Day. Let me just say that today. Let me remind you, because we've been talking about that. But there's an article in today's paper that Imani has written, and let me just find it for you. It is, she's looking at Cuba at Jamaica relations, and she's also saying that there's just so much more to what's happening there. And as we celebrate women this month and girls, she is pointing to a problem, a particular problem among women and girls right now that's escalating in Cuba, which is period poverty. And all right, so tell me, who do I have on? Because I have Dr. Imani Tafari Amma. All right, let me take a break and you tell me what to do. And in this segment of the program, we're going to be having just about 25 minutes, if so much. But since I hear that we have Dr. Rosemary Mealy on Zoom, also Professor Melville Pascal, and since we just wrapped up with Professor Horace Campbell, v. Cuba, I think we'll join our sister Rosemary Mealy, who I think will understand this very well, what's happening now, as a former journalist herself. She is a PhD, an activist, a JD PhD, is an activist, educator, and author. She has been acknowledged for her long history of engaged community activism and contributions to artistic innovation, education, scholarly endeavors, and international human rights struggles. She's a longtime friend of Cuba and worked in that country as an internationalist and journalist at Radio Havana, Cuba. Her participation in international forums with non-governmental organizations has garnered global recognition and respect for her advocacy in defense of U.S. political prisoners, gender equality, and the illegal imposition of U.S. economic and political sanctions against sovereign nations, including Cuba. Dr. Rosemary Mealy, my sister, are you there?
Yes, sister, good morning. Yes.
Yeah, it's really great to see you. My apologies. You're in a little early. Well, this is exactly how it should be. So the ancestors have a hand in this. You should come immediately around the time or just after Professor Horace Campbell. So you're in the right position. I think Queen Nanny made it so.
Oh yeah, it's powerful. Horace, just to hear him, he's giving the history he's doing. I mean, he's just placing us where we should be this morning. Good Sunday morning.
Yes, beautiful to see you, my sister. Let me start by asking, because I know that you're in touch with our brothers and sisters in Cuba. Just a quick update. The blockade is still on. There's a strangulation in Cuba. There's an economic chokehold in Cuba. I am just seeing where Vijay Prashad landed just a few hours ago, and has been writing about that. What can you tell me about the latest in terms of how Cubans are faring and holding strain?
Well, thank you in acknowledging that today is International Working Women's Day.
Yes.
And I want to send out a greeting to all our sisters in Jamaica and sisters who are listening around the world, and especially to our Cuban sisters who are struggling and being so, and it's just that word resistant, resilient. You can't use that word hard enough or long enough. The situation is dire. In terms of oil, the lack of petroleum to be able to move the country, and of course this is a result of the horrible, the machinistic, I can't even describe, the government of this country and the image of Donald Trump, and attempting to starve the Cuban people. That is the objective. Mm-hmm. But the people are not starving at this point. Let me just say that the people are not starving because they're finding ways to resist. Mm-hmm. And especially the women. I got a call it was a Zoom yesterday from sisters in Cuba. There's a whole group of women called Afro-feministas.
All right, Sister Imani, could you mute your microphone for me, please, Sister Imani? We're speaking live with Dr. Rosemary Mealy. Yes, go ahead, Dr. Rosemary. Are you hearing me? Yes. All right, I think you're muted now, Prof. Rosemary, or Sister Rosemary.
Yes,
go ahead.
Okay,
yes.
Great.
Okay,
That's radio.
Yes.
What I'm saying is that there's a group of sisters in Cuba. They're known as Afro-feministas. And this is a very important movement that stretches all along the Caribbean, down into Latin America, South America, where women of African descent organized many years ago to address the question of racism and their realities. And Cuban women have been so strong in terms of raising this question of the necessity for women throughout the diaspora to organize and to come to Cuba to visit. And so yesterday was, just seeing photos of them meeting together, the blackouts, which are in Havana on Thursday, there was an entire blackout in the whole area of a whole province of Havana. Mm-hmm. There was no lights. There are no lights. There's no electricity. But people mobilized anyway to come together to make sure that the hospital generators were operating, because this is so important to show you how cruel this country is and the impact. When there are no lights, and that impacts the generators in the hospital. Doctors cannot operate. Doctors cannot take care of their patients. Mm-hmm. And so this is a stark reality, especially when we look at what has happened with the medical brigades that have left Cuba, and I'm sure you talked about that earlier.
Yes.
But what I'm saying, the reality is right now that there's a mobilization. The president has put into place talking about the priorities. The priorities are to make sure that the hospitals are operating, despite the lack of oil. The whole fact that tourism is still occurring, which is important because they still need people to come to Cuba. You can travel. Of course, you can travel to Cuba. You can travel to Cuba, but as I've spoken before, we can only travel there under certain conditions. But here we're taking, we're organizing to take all kinds of humanitarian aid. And this is the moment. This is the moment that speaking to our brothers and sisters there in Jamaica, and as Horace has said, you are so close. You can carry food. You can carry medicine. You can carry solar power. You can carry solar power into the country. And this is what's needed right now. Mm-hmm. The other thing that's happening while they're going through this incredible situation, they're also, thank God for China, they're also placing they're installing solar powers. There's one part of the country trying to move out of the whole idea of dependency on fossil fuel. You know, that is a point. And so the solar, having access to solar power is so important now. And so here in this country, we have been raising resources to donations to purchase solar powers. I mean, I'm talking about large scale purchases, buying it wherever it can be bought, and then taking it to the country. So, and these solar powers are really directed, because we have to travel legally. It has to be for humanitarian aid. And so that has been a major project in this country. You'd ask, what is the situation on the ground? The situation on the ground, it's very serious. There's a lack of transportation to make sure that the garbage is picked up. Cuba is a very clean country. Yes. But you see the impact of this because there's no fuel. You cannot get food coming in. The trucks cannot operate from the countryside to bring food into the country. So people are finding ways to collectivize their resources to make sure that nobody is starving. But that is the objective of this policy of this government. It wants to force a situation in Cuba where people will have to bow down and become a colony again, which is what we're seeing happening throughout the Caribbean with people, with countries just, following the Trump administration's challenging of trying to get people trying to get nations to recolonize themselves. Cuba is refusing to do that. And one of the things is the propaganda that we're hearing coming in the U.S. And as Har says, that propaganda spews all over everywhere. So we have a challenge to. And
it is surprising that the extent to which Cuba can hear us and we can hear Cuba on a clear day, that more is not being done in terms of journalism within the Caribbean, whether it's the CMC or I'm not quite sure if it's the CMC anymore, but Caribbean media. Mobilizing to go into Cuba, but Caribbean media is also following the direction of Caribbean governments, and I suppose that is something that we are going to have to deal with as scholar activists. Let me take a quick break, Prof, and I'll come right back to talk a little bit about the decision that has been made by Jamaica with the medical mission. We have just about 7 minutes.
Okay.
I'm so sorry, but so Jamaica has made this decision. I know you've been following this very closely, and we've heard the response from Cuba. Cuba is very disappointed at the decision to cancel the medical mission. We're waking up this morning to another press release from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to say that Marco Rubio was right. It's basically what it says. The doctors are not being paid properly and they do not have their passports, and so we had to make this decision. Your response? Well, with
the few minutes that I have left, I just want to point out what Cuba did in Jamaica, because in that press release, it's so clear, and people, you need to know this, and people around the world who are ever listening. I did not know that more than 90,000 lives were saved by this medical personnel that was in Cuba for the past 30 almost 40 years.
In Jamaica.
Like in Jamaica, I'm sorry. 7,000, the stats are so important for people to know. Maybe that will get through to people's heads. 7,170 births were attended to. More than 8,176,000 Jamaicans were treated by the Cubans. More than 8 million. Can you believe that? That's the historical results of the collaboration, and it speaks for itself. And then you had the Operation Miracle. That Operation Miracle was presented in Jamaica in 2010, where more than nearly 25,000 Jamaicans have had their eyesight restored or improved by Cuban cooperation. That's the humanitarianism of the Cuban doctors and Cuba's internationalism. I could go down the line and just list what
the numbers make a difference. And when you hear the numbers, it brings home forcefully to you the extent to which Jamaica relied on, depended on, and still depending on this Cuba medical mission?
Absolutely. And Cuba remains steadfast, it says. It says it remains steadfast at their objective to always provide internationalism, to always provide support and humanitarian aid wherever it is, even as their friends are kicking them out. Their friends are kicking them out. Cuba has been more of a friend, in my opinion, in all of the Caribbean. Jamaica is one of the places because of the longevity of that relationship, you know. And so, you know, when you ask me, you know, the responding, I mean, I'm passionate about this. We were relying, the international solidarity movement, especially those of us in the United States, we always relied on Jamaica. And we flew to Jamaica oftentimes when we could not fly to Cuba. By the way, the airports are still open in Cuba. You can still fly into Cuba. Okay. But we would fly to Jamaica because Jamaica welcomed us, and then we would take the flight over to Havana. I remember that. And so,
why do you think Jamaica took this decision? There's a similar thing that happened with Italy. Italy said no, obviously a whole different country. But Jamaica, that we have looked to, myself, to lead the way in at times like these, critical times like these, has taken a decision like that. How do you read this?
Well, I think we read it by going back to what happened yesterday at Mar-a-Lago, when the president brought in all those white reactionary leaders from Latin America, and he with the shield of the Americas Summit. I think that's important. We have to follow what happened at the shield of the American Summit. And this whole position again goes back to the use of drug interdiction as being the primary reason for why the United States has to align themselves and bully other countries into subservience. So at that meeting, the situation basically is a justification for going into Venezuela. There's a justification for that. And I was so angry to read that when they talked about, when Trump talked about Cuba is next, the number of Latin American leaders who clapped at that, you know. So, it just shows you how this axis has just proliferated all over the southern part in Europe. When Rubio was in a couple of weeks ago, he was in Europe. They laid out the fact that the goal is to recolonize and to bring back what they call Western thought, Western idea, and to just abolish all that we have struggled for to be free. And that is their goal. And I think that the militarization of Trump is emphasizing the need to use military to fight so-called cartels, arguing that you can't fight these people, whoever they are, without. He also proposes a coalition to eradicate cartels. And listen, where are the drugs coming from? You know, you talk about Jamaica, and we need to talk about this some more. And Horace may have talked about the direct link of illegal drugs is a tie into Israel also. So, you know, we have been
talking about that on air, and so our listeners will be familiar with that with Dr. Darius Figuera out of Trinidad. We have been laying this groundwork, it's interesting, for almost a year before the first bomb dropped on Venezuela, if they did drop any. But it's interesting because what they accused Venezuela of is happening right beside them. These people were in the shield of the Americas Summit yesterday.
Absolutely. I'm glad. I mean, so me bringing this up today, it just affirms what you've been doing for the past, whoever your guest talked about it. Yes. You know, we're truth tellers.
Yes.
And people need to listen to that. So what I say here in the U.S. and what you say there and what the journalists are saying there and uncovering, we know that this is happening. And so there we have to make those links. And what is so serious, sister, is the fact that what happened with your leadership, the kind of soft, the double talk, you watch what he said at CARICOM, and then you read the statement. You read the statement that's fully. So you ask me, what do I think? I think that the reasonings go back. I mean, we have to follow back. Who are these leaders? Who are they attached to? What has been their self-interest? And we need to investigate more. I mean, is it because of what is Trump offering? What is Trump offering to the people of Jamaica? They're not offering replacing the medical doctors, or they plan to do the same thing that in some of the other countries where they're bringing in nurses and doctors from Ghana to fill the space, you know.
And this is what they have said, Ghana and the Philippines. We saw Shirley Ralph texting yesterday asking, so then is America going to fill this gap when you, she's always saying when Jamaica is forced to do this. And I think a voice like hers matters in the space. I suppose we need more of that. And Professor Harris was just talking about the Congressional Black Caucus and so on. Where do we go from here? In the few minutes we have, which is about 2, I know there are plans to go in. How can we be part of that? How can we participate to go into Cuba?
I think that one of the most important thing is to show up in en masse in March 20th and be a part of the global caravan, a convoy for those who cannot go through the flotilla. You'll join, Cuba is going to accept, you know, and there's going to be thousands of people there, and that convoy is going to take this humanitarian aid to different parts of Cuba. You'll meet the Cuban people, you'll see what life is like, you'll come back, you'll fight more, you'll demand of the United States government that they remove Cuba from the state sponsor of terrorism list so that they can trade. We say let Cuba live, and we have to find ways to ensure that Cuba lives, because Cuba is saying victory, land or death. They're not going to go down as we saw in Venezuela. The Cubans are going to defend their revolution, and they're going to defend it, and they're going to ensure it, and they're going to stand up. And we need to learn from them. Just
before we wrap, Sister Rosemary, tell us a little bit more about the flotilla or the convoy.
Okay, now I don't know too much about the flotilla. At one point, the idea was to have a flotilla that would travel from Mexico. But what happened? There were many people feeling that, you know, that could be a bit dangerous. You know, given how they were. You know, we saw what happened.
Yeah.
Yes. So we are encouraging people. I mean, you're in a different situation. I mean, if you can get to Cuba during that week of the 19th to the 25th, you can join this caravan or convoy in Havana, and that's what we're encouraging people to do. That if you fly over, take suitcases full of medicine, you know, food, and when you arrive there, all of that will be combined together as a part of this massive humanitarian structure that's being set up inside of the country to travel to the various parts. So we're calling it a convoy, but you can be a part of that. If you can get to Cuba via a flotilla, then you would be welcome with that also. But those of us coming from outside, you know, coming from the U.S. and other parts of the country, it's mainly that people are flying in and then meeting and then joining each other with this kind of like a caravan movie.
The week of the 19th to the 25th. All right. Well, that is great news. And for persons who are interested, just get to Cuba the week of the 19th to the 25th. But to help, and you talked about over-the-counter drugs. You talked about satellite. And there's so much of this that we are even more than before familiar with because of Hurricane Melissa. So we know exactly what's needed in Cuba.
Yes, and the Cubans were there to help during that hurricane.
They were there, I'm telling you.
24/7. They worked 24/7.
They did. Dr. Rosemary, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. I hope to come back with more information.
I look forward to having you back on as soon as possible. All right, Dr. Rosemary Mealy, activist, educator, and author, and of course a longtime friend of Cuba. We're standing by now for the Supreme Ventures draw. All right, I do see that we're having a little problem. Honey, my sister, are you there?
I am here. Good morning, Sister Cabo, and thank you so much for this forum.
Thank you so much, my sister. Long time. At least I'm seeing your photograph here. Hey.
Hey.
Imani, how are you doing? All right, so Imani, you're writing in the paper today. Your article is published. And you're talking about the deepening crisis in Cuba. You have said it is not only Cuba's problem, but it's a warning and a responsibility for the entire Caribbean region, especially CARICOM states like Jamaica. And on this International Women's Day, you've gone a bit further to talk about how this economic chokehold that is now on Cuba is affecting women and girls, specifically in Cuba. So I wanted to speak to that, first of all, even as we celebrate and observe International Women's Day today.
Yes, it is a good moment for me to come in after the previous guests have already established the historical context within which we have to frame our activism, our social activism, our desire for justice, because all of these entangled issues come out of our hundreds of years of being under the yoke of colonial terrorism. And what is happening in Cuba is a multiple model of how resistance comes up against sharp pushbacks. And we know that only too well, because even though we were enslaved, we resisted in so many ways, but those resistance efforts were always choked, to use your word, by enslavement codes that designated precise forms of violence to quell any form of that desire to be free. So, for example, when you look at the neck shackle, the neck shackle is an interesting object because the two ends are extended to prevent you from running freely through the sugarcane field. But if people were not running away, that instrument would not have been developed. They used their technological genius as colonizers to produce these weapons of restriction for our freedom. So we can take that literally, and we can put it at the symbolic level, and we can fuse it with the impact of that material effort to checkmate you. So for those who play chess, when you're checkmating the king, because it's not an eating game, it's a game of power to control the center of the board and the various other parts of the power plays that run the world. But Cuba is now experiencing that convergence of strategies that you exercise on the chessboard to checkmate the king, which is the ultimate goal. So this move that happened with our response to our relationship with Cuba is because we have been checkmated in a technical sense too, and therefore have to, when there's a stalemate in a chess game, there's one pawn left with the king. And you have a series, I think it's 22 moves, I can't remember. But you have, at a point, you have the option to genuflect, to lay your pawn down, to demonstrate that you concede to the king's power. And I think technically we have done that concession. Because
that's what we are. You're saying this is what Jamaica has done.
Yes,
we have conceded.
That we are out of moves, right? And it's not, you remember that chess is not an eating game, it's a game of which piece it has more power. So for example, the bishop represents the church, and the horseman, which you can jump over in that movement, is the army. So chess is not just a game; it is an explanation.
I kind of like, and I'd like what you've done with the extended metaphor, if you will, because this is exactly where, and we are seeing a lot of memes, and this is exactly where we are. This is how the artists and the poets are interpreting what has happened, even if you look at the memes that are out there. You have, and we heard our sister, Dr. Rosemary Mealy, just now saying that the human effects are severe, that the situation is dire. You've also gone beyond that, because you talk about the human cost in Cuba right now. And interestingly, you wrote this before Jamaica made a decision, right?
Indeed. In fact, you know, it is interesting, Cabo. I wrote that article 2 weeks ago.
Well, there you go.
And the editor held it and then asked me to update it in light of current events.
And you would have needed to update it again. So we need to see the next part, because what you've pointed out, and I think especially on this International Women's Day, is that you talk about the human cost, particularly on vulnerable groups, and look at the shortages of basic goods and even period poverty, where women and girls cannot easily access menstrual products. So even within the context of the rules-based order, which is the United Nations and UNICEF and UNESCO, and all of these groups, which are powerless to even, and International Women's Day is a United Nations construct, but yes, powerless now to intervene in Cuba at the level, at an official level, where you to at least impact what you have referenced here, which is something as simple as women and girls not able to get pads, sanitary napkins in this time.
And it's not a new problem. And years ago, when Jamaica was in more solidarity with Cuba, women from Jamaica used to mobilize to take sanitary supplies to women and girls in Cuba. And what it comes down to is, let us say your daughter, who is in high school, having to choose between the days that she attends school, because she might be too embarrassed to have to change her cloth pad, which is not comfortable in the days when you can now have tampons and winged pads and all these conveniences, which people don't normally even think about as something that could be unavailable. But for decades, women in Cuba have had to be using, like how people used to use nappy for their babies, and they now automatically think that Pampers is a normal thing.
Yes.
But just a few years ago, bird's eye nappies were what people used. So something similar to that. Imagine that you're having to give your daughter a little packet with those to change, and to put them in a little packet to recycle them when she comes home, to wash them out and this and this and that. And when you put it in the framework of how sanctions affect women at a bodily level, you get a notion of what intersectionality is, because women who are feminists or who are womanists, who advocate women's rights, talked about how the personal is political, and that notion of the personal being political means that the ways in which power falls on women's bodies is a lens through which you can look at the wider power architecture and structures and systems throughout the world. And that is why Black women paused and said, you know, the feminism that white women are talking about is not our struggle in the way they're...
Hold a second. I want to pick up right there when I come back. Hold a sec for me, please. Segment of the program. I'm talking about Professor Melvin Pascal. Professor Pascal obtained his undergraduate degree in agricultural science from the University of the West Indies in Trinidad, and later pursued graduate studies at Michigan State University, where he obtained a master's degree in packaging science and a dual major PhD in food science and environmental toxicology. He then worked at the Food and Drug Administration in Chicago, Illinois, where he trained FDA field inspectors, performed research, and later served in an administrative role in Washington. He is currently a faculty member at Ohio State University, conducting research in food packaging, food safety, and product shelf life, while teaching food packaging and food law. Professor Pascal is also a fellow of the Institute of Food Technologists and recipient of the 2022 International Food Award. He has also supported food packaging and processing, that's processing development here in Jamaica. He is including work with the University of the West Indies Mona campus, the Jamaica Bureau of Standards, and local manufacturing companies. Matter of fact, he's now in Jamaica on a very, very serious mission within the context you just heard. Professor Pascal, it's really great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us on the Africa Forum this morning.
Much, and thank you for having me.
Right, and for your patience, may I just add that. Thank you so much. All right, Prof. I know you've been listening and hearing, and as a Caribbean man yourself, I just wanted your quick take on what's happening in the region right now, Cuba in particular. Just your quick perspective on how you see this.
Well, in the Caribbean, my philosophy is if we are self-sufficient in what we have, the resources we have, then we are better able to chart our own destiny. There are resources, and for example, and I guess we will come to that a little bit later when we talk about why I'm here in Jamaica, and it is to promote one of our own products, or one of the things that we have in our own environment, where we can create the things that we need for sustenance. And my philosophy is when we do that, we become, more in control of our lives, our destinies, instead of, us being dependent on people who are outside of the region.
Yes. So we deflect at a time like this, especially at such a time like this, as my father would say, to self-sufficiency, to the teachings of Marcus Garvey Mwalimu. We have the template, don't we? Because as Professor Horace Campbell was saying earlier, that we've come through so much and we've survived, and we already have the innate knowing and also the spirit to survive and to thrive. And that takes me then to, why are you in Jamaica? You're at the University of the West Indies right now, and it fits in with everything else that we're saying, because here we're talking about self-sufficiency. Where do we go from here, especially on the backside of what looks like World War III? I know you're not calling it that, but I'm calling it that. So why are you in Jamaica?
Well, I'm here on a Fulbright fellowship. And specifically, I'm here to work with one of the problems that you're having here in Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean, and not only the Caribbean, but the Gulf Coast countries and even North America, the southern part of North America. And that is the problem of Sargassum on our beaches. And here in Jamaica, a significant part of the economy relies on tourism and fishing. So Sargassum, if I'm not sure how much the listeners are familiar with it, especially those who live far from the beaches.
Yeah, they'll know what it is. So, but tell us what. But they probably don't know the name. In other words, we've seen I think we're calling it seaweed.
Yes, it's a seaweed. Yes, and it comes, and this time of the year, it's when it's most prevalent, and it comes, in large quantities, and then it clogs up the beach. It interferes with tourism, it interferes with the fishing industry, and of course the aesthetics of the environment. It's costly because we have to remove it, the hotels, and removing it is costly. And apart from that, once the seaweed is removed from the sea, then it dies, and when it does, it stinks because it produces hydrogen sulfide, which is a very stink-smelling gas. And, so you have to handle and manage the sargassum, and it's a problem.
How bad is it in terms of the damage that it's doing to the coastline? I mean, I took a drive, my daughter, myself, we've been looking at it over time, from Anotta Bay all the way through to Robbins Bay, from Port Maria, and all along the coastline. I was actually frightened, just thinking about what damage this could possibly do. But is this dangerous?
Well, one of the problems with Sargassum is it picks up chemicals from the sea. Mm-hmm. And it picks up what we call toxic heavy metals. For example, arsenic is one, cadmium is another, lead, and some other minerals not as toxic as arsenic, cadmium, and lead, but still it does pick it up from the sea. And although people have found uses for it, for example, fertilizer, they can use it because as it picks up the compounds from the sea, it's rich to the plants. However, the problem is that the plants can then pick up some of these heavy metals like the arsenic and cadmium and lead in particular. And if we use it to fertilize vegetables, then studies have shown that when you test the vegetables, you do get some of these heavy metals in the vegetables. So again, this is something that one has to be very conscious of.
Because people are putting this in their gardens. I remember somebody carried a whole heap to me to say, no man, it's this good for the plants. But you're saying not really.
Well, for vegetables, for example.
Not for vegetables, right.
But if we use it for ornamental plants that we don't consume, yes, there is that benefit. Of course, it's going to cause your garden to get a...
Oh, yes. Yes, excuse me with it. You're here because this is not just a Jamaica thing, right? This is Caribbean wide, isn't it?
Yes, this is Caribbean wide, and also the Gulf states. So countries like Mexico, Costa Rica, those countries that Belize, they're going to get the same problem. Even Florida also has the problem. And also some of the northern countries in South America, Brazil, for example, they do have the problem.
Why are we seeing so much of it now? I don't remember seeing this. I grew up, by the seaside, literally. Well, not by, but we have a pass the sea almost every week. I don't remember seeing this at all. I know there's a book called White Sargassum Sea, and everybody was wondering what that was. But we've never seen it, really. So what has changed?
Well, and this is the belief that global warming is responsible for this upsurge in the amount of sargassum we are seeing. Sargassum really comes from what we call the Sargassum Sea out in the Atlantic Ocean. And the belief is, and there are studies that have shown it, that the runoff, for example, from agriculture, fertilizers and pollution from processing plants, some of these things are responsible. And of course, the global warming means that the ocean, the temperature of the ocean is more conducive for the proliferation of the growth of the seaweed. So these combined things come together, and now we are seeing this explosion.
Going across Jamaica, the coastline, the entire coastline, and you try to go to the beach and it is a problem. Where the hotels are, it's not so bad because they do the cleaning up. But if you just go and drive off road and catch a little beach somewhere, no, it's kind of tough. And we're talking about Sargassum. All right, Professor, tell us about your work. What are you doing in terms of Sargassum? Because you also said self-sufficiency related to the work I'm doing with Sargassum. How does that work?
Yeah, and for example, when I talked about self-sufficiency, I'm specifically talking about how can we use what we have to meet our needs. Now, one of what I am doing and my focus is to use Sargassum to make plastic. Because and specifically for food packaging applications.
Yes.
Because we package our foods. we use packaging to transport our food. We go to the grocery store, for example. We have to use a bag to put our food in, the food we purchase in the bag so we can take it to wherever we want to go. How can we use it? Now, I know there are researchers who are using Sargassum to create biofuels. So again, you can see we can use the Sargassum to provide the energy that we need.
Yes.
And for most Caribbean islands in particular, they have to import the fuel where it comes from, you know. So the thing is, I'm saying let's focus on some of these things.
Yes.
And in the case of Sargassum, it is turning a disaster into something that benefits us.
This is opportunity out of crisis.
Right. Yeah. I remember back, I think it was during the pandemic, was 2020, I think, or 2019, giving a presentation to the Caribbean. And at the time, the volcano in St. Vincent was erupting. And you had all this ash that was being expelled and, you know, it was in the environment. The farmers were problem with it, you know, on the crops and so on. And my take on it was this: why can't we use this to benefit us? For example, we have the universities in the Caribbean, and researchers can get together to do some analysis on the ash. And from what I had, you know, read about it, it has certain desirable compounds that we could use to make cement. So we can use this and open a whole industry.
Yes.
Provide employment. We could reduce importation of the basic things that we need by using our own natural resources. And that's the point I'm making. And here, I'm in Jamaica to find a use for the Sargassum. And for what I'm doing is to use it to make plastic, what we call bio-based plastic. Plastic that wouldn't become a problem to the environment, as is the case with some of the petroleum-based plastics. But the bio-based plastics, they tend to degrade very easily. But at the same time, we have to develop the plastic so that it becomes useful for what we need it for. So that's really the focus of what I am doing.
What does that entail in terms of the work you're doing? Because you're based at the University of the West Indies. How integral is UE to the work that you're doing, and what does it entail?
Well, my background is in material science, and I've studied quite extensively plastic in particular. So most of the research that I have been doing at Ohio State University is with plastics, both petroleum and with bio-based plastics. So coming here and working with the University of the West Indies, this is not my first assignment. As a matter of fact, I started working with the University of the West Indies back in about 2010, around there. And I've worked with them to help to implement a master's program that focuses on food processing. And, you know, every year I come and I teach the food packaging course. And I will make again this year while I'm here. So this is a long-term relationship that I have with the University of the West Indies as it relates to food production and food processing and packaging in Jamaica.
In terms of the Sargassum itself, are you across Jamaica, or you're focused in a particular area?
Currently, the Sargassum that I have currently in the lab that we are working with, we got it from the Hillshire area, but pretty much this is the first set of testing we are doing. I want to believe that maybe down the road we would look to see if the Sargassum that comes from a different part of the country might be slightly different in terms of the behavior of the seaweed and the material that we make from it. And now one of the things that we are doing right now with the seaweed that we have, we've separated them into species, because Sargassum is not just one species.
Oh.
The ones that come to Jamaica, we have about 3 or 4 main species, but I'm looking at 2 species. What I'm looking at is one species a better choice to make plastic as compared to another species? Would the yield be higher? Because I'm not just making a prototype of the plastic, which I have already, because since I've been here since October.
Yes.
We've already made a prototype. So we have the plastic. We know that it could be done.
Oh.
But what I am focusing on, and what I would like to see, is that it could become commercialized. Because then my take is, what's the point of doing research and the research winds up on the shelf? There must be this, okay, so let's look at the percentage yield. How much sargassum do we need to produce plastic? How can we improve that yield? Which is the best option? Which is the best species? These are the kinds of things that I hope to look at least even at this initial stage of the research I'm doing.
And in terms of what you found already, and especially how much do you need, do you have an idea? Are you able to say or guesstimate? I know it's serious scientific research, but what are you seeing?
Well, right now we are still in the early stages. So since I came, what I've done is we took sargassum, just go to the beach, collect it, and then use it. First of all, we wanted to see could we make the film? And we've done that.
Yes.
The next step that we are looking at is, in the process of making the film, can we also remove the heavy metals? Because if we make the plastic and the plastic has the heavy metals in it, then that limits the application. Because since this is a bio-based plastic, one of the things that I'm looking at is, can we use it for edible packaging? And that's plastics that we can eat. I know it.
No, I have to take a break and come back to that one. With us, we're talking about sargassum and the possible uses of what appears to be a toxic thing, because it smelled bad and it looked like it damaging the coastline. And we are scratching our heads as to how in heaven's name do we deal with this? Well, here comes Professor Pascal. Plastic, biofuel, that's a question that's also on the table, even though this is not what you're working on right now, Professor Pascal. But plastic, and even edible plastic from sargassum.
Yes, certainly, edible plastic. Well, with packaging, with food packaging, there is a deep psychology associated with packaging and food packaging.
Yes.
And it works well when we are not conscious of it. And the packaging industry is well aware of this. When you buy a product, you don't buy the product because you want the package. You buy the product because you want the food.
True.
But in most cases, not all cases, but in most cases, the package costs more money than the food that you want.
That's true.
And when you're finished, after you consume the food, what do you do with the package?
Right.
You throw it away.
Yes.
You're throwing away something of more value than what you consume. But we are not conscious of it. We don't think that way.
Right.
Well, it's designed like that. And the package is designed to draw you to the food.
Yes.
The colors, the shape of the package, the size of the package. These things do have, an impact on our decision-making ability.
Yeah.
Because you go to the grocery store and you walk down the aisle, and you may see several products of the same type, but from different manufacturers. And the packaging that is used to package the product has a significant impact on drawing you to which brand you are going to buy.
Yes.
Many times we are not conscious of it. Yes, it does matter.
Mm-hmm.
Graphics, the color,
Yeah.
these things do matter. So the issue of edible packaging, it sounds gross that, what, am I eating plastic?
Well, this is what I was going to come to, because if it is plastic, then how do you, at what point, where do you draw the line? Because plastic would be harmful to the body, isn't it? I mean, to ingest. So how can you say edible plastic? Isn't that in itself a misnomer?
Well, not all plastics are toxic. For example, let me show you a plastic that many people consume, and maybe you may have consumed it this morning. What about a capsule?
What?
A capsule.
Oh, a capsule.
With medication, or with pharmaceuticals, or with supplements.
Yes.
Morning, I had cod liver oil capsules.
Right, and I had D3. I had D3.
That's a plastic. It's
I had my D3. Yes. And with magnesium.
One example.
Right.
But you see, this is what I'm saying. We don't think about these things this way. You see, look at a can, a food can. You know how much technology is involved in a food can? But we don't think about it. We simply just buy it, open the thing, and drink the stuff, and when we're done, we throw it out, and we gone our way. We don't want you to focus on the technology involved. That's why we charge you so much money for the package. So you buy a bottle of water or soda, for example, and you pay, how much? Here in Jamaica, you may pay about $150 for a soft drink.
I'm ashamed I don't know.
Well, okay, let's assume it's that price.
Yeah.
The actual drink itself, which is what you are interested in, may cost about $25. And you are spending $125 for the package, which is the bottle or the can, plus the label, plus the cap. All of these things are part of the package.
Yes.
And it costs money, so that manufacturers have to take these prices and factor these things into the cost of the product, which is what you pay as consumers.
Yeah. Without giving away too much, what would edible plastic, how would that work in packaging? Because when you talk about capsules, I mean, these are small things that you just swallow, you're not chewing.
Yeah. Well, for example, let me show you an application of edible packaging that, again, you may not be conscious of. Take a Jamaica patty. On the inside, you have the filling, which is wet, moist. It has a high moisture content.
Yes.
And the crust is dry.
Right.
Don't want the moist filling to cause the crust to become soggy. Because then the patty is going to lose that crispy texture that it has that you like and that you're accustomed with. Well, you can use an edible package to prevent excessive moisture from the filling getting to the crust. So it's edible. You don't have to put it on the label. You don't have to tell consumers that that is what you've done. But your patty is going to be of a higher quality to the guy down the street who is making and selling patty and not doing what you're doing. You see, that's just another example.
Yes.
And in many cases, these things do happen and we just don't know. And, if you look at food regulations, let's say it's something that's packaged and it has to be sold, then the food regulations say that you have to put it on the label, the ingredients. Well, since the plastic is biodegradable and it's made, let's say, from starch, then you don't have to put that on the label specifically because it's like starch, which is, again, part of the ingredient of the product itself. So you can hide a lot of this information from the public legally, and you don't have to give away your trade secrets because it could be used as trade secrets. And
you said legally. What are the ethical considerations, if any?
Well, if it's food. So, for example, if I put sugar or I put certain spices in my food to enhance the flavor of my food, there is nothing illegal in it, because spices are approved additives for food, food safe additives.
Yeah.
You see, as long as it's used, not indiscriminately. Because if we talk about food regulations, there is something called good manufacturing practices, and that means that even if you are using an ingredient in the food that is approved, it has to be used with certain discretions. So nothing is wrong with my using a known ingredient in the food, but I have simply changed the nature of the ingredient. I use it to make a film, and I use it in the food. Because in making films for edible packaging, I have used milk to make films. I've used cassava, mushrooms. I've even used cactus, which is from the aloe vera variety. These are something. I've used citrus, orange, apples. So you can
do all of this without doing genetically engineered stuff.
Right, yes. Because the ingredients that we use to make plastics are what we can use carbohydrates. And take cassava, for example, because I have made films from cassava. The starch in cassava, you can use that to make films. And it's food. Corn, for example, is used quite widely. And of all the edible films, making films from corn has been the most successful in making a plastic called polylactic acid. It behaves very much like the petroleum-based plastics. And I have been to the grocery store here in Jamaica and seen polylactic acid films being used in food packaging. And that's come from corn, or it could be made from sugarcane.
Yes. So we have enough around us that grow naturally to do so much more than what we're doing. What we need is a bit of innovation.
Yes.
Why do you think that is so lacking?
Well, we have to put money into it. Because if we want to do research with our natural products, and right now, for example, there is a student that I know at the University of the West Indies, and I'm on his committee, and he's using, I think you call it guinep in Jamaica.
Yeah, chenet.
Again, it's called chenet in Trinidad. Yeah. And he's using it to make edible films. There are a lot of crops that we can use here, and these techniques are widely known. Some of these techniques, it's not to say that we have to come up with something that is really outside of the box, because a lot of these research, for example, the research into making films from apples, well, it's the same technique that I have used to make the film from oranges, from citrus peel. So if we have an industry here in Jamaica that's making orange juice from oranges that are produced here in Jamaica, instead of throwing away the peel, we can use the peel to make films, plastic films. Now, what we will have to do is we will have to develop the industry to produce the plastic, and we will want to make sure that we have a steady supply of the raw material. So again, we have to tie in the production of the raw material with the processing, and then we scale it up to produce products that could supply the market and also export and prevent the importation of foreign products, and we become more self-sufficient. So we have to look at it that way down the road. It's an investment.
Of course, we have so much waste, and you and I talked before, and I told you that one of the things I noticed in St. Elizabeth, for example, that they have a lot of black mangoes, and when it's mango season, you're driving over mango like asphalt, and in other places of Jamaica, it is apple. So in food season, our foods go to waste. You're saying there is so much more that you can do with the foods going to waste, but it needs investment.
Yes. It needs human investment, and it also needs capital investment. If we want to produce and become self-sufficient, there is no way we can get away from it. We can't depend on people from another country or another region coming in and developing our products. And, we have to put aside funds. We have to put aside energy. Our institutions must see this as an essential part of the development of Jamaica, the Caribbean, because we have steady climate year round. So we could produce food, we can produce products year round. We don't have to worry about winter when the growing season is dormant. No, we can do these things, and we can switch from one crop to the next if in fact one crop has a season, or our agriculture researchers could develop varieties that could produce a year round. There are all these things we could do, but it's a mindset, and it is that willingness to want to commit funds, to commit effort to doing these things. But it could be done.
And I think the mindset is critical that you mentioned there, because we seem to have bought into, the idea of importing, and the food importation business is a big business in Jamaica. I think that there's also a resistance from those who are taking in food into the country, that there's a resistance.
Well, the thing is, we can turn this same, as you mentioned, there is this, willingness to want to do import. We could turn that around to have the willingness to want to produce our own food, to want to produce our own products with the natural raw materials that we have in the country. How do you do that? I must admit that changing culture is difficult. It's like trying to turn a big ship around, but we can do it. Other countries have done it. I have been to some Asian countries, and I've seen where they've used cassava to make plastic bowls, so that when they sell takeaway food, instead of putting it in polystyrene containers, they put it in these containers that they made from cassava. And when they are finished, they take the trash and feed it to the goats or feed it to the cows. Because if it's made from natural, materials, natural food, then the animals can eat it. So you minimize having to purchase food for the animals. You minimize the impact of trash into the environment. And there is a win-win situation. Yeah. But you have to want to develop these things yourself. You have to see to it that, listen, this is an investment for us, for the future, that we could become more self-sufficient and less dependent on outside influences. And Sargassum is an opportunity to do it in the case of biofuels, because as your listeners were talking a while ago, and they were talking about the importation of fuel in Cuba, for example. Well, because Cuba also has the problem of Sargassum, and if they can use it to produce biofuels, then they don't have to depend on the importation of fuel. So but we have to invest into these things.
And the question is, why did we drag our feet on this?
Well, I think that programs like this can serve as a catalyst to bring to people's, bring it to the forefront of their mind what we could do. And maybe I should take it a little further and say what we should do. And I'm sure that this is the hope. This is because sometimes we need to say certain things to wake up people. People may not be conscious of certain things because, let's face it, and, manufacturers, in order to sell their product, they advertise their product. And the reason why we enjoy certain imported foods, because manufacturers are doing a good job of advertising the food to us. Well, let's hope that what we are doing here this morning is an advertisement to the public. It's an advertisement to our elected officials that we can do more to use our natural products to provide the basic necessities that we enjoy and that we need.
Prof, hold on, let me take a quick break. And packaging and manufacturing and self-sufficiency. Well, not gains in self-sufficiency, but what we can do. Obviously, Prof, the good thing about all of this and the bottom line is that we have the resources. It's not that we don't have what we need, the products. We have the raw material, if you will.
Yeah.
So it's just for us to be serious enough about food security.
Yeah, and I should say this because I have seen concerted effort in some countries to really use local products. Over the past, I would say probably 7 years or so, 5 to 7 years, I've seen a significant increase in the use of some of the local products. I've seen cassava to make cassava chips. Traditionally, we used potato chips, and we didn't grow the potato that we see these chips being made of. Now we are beginning to see cassava chips, breadfruit chips.
Yum, that's true. But not, well, I think we're still doing planting here like in Jamaica, but I don't think we're using yam and potato and cassava in the way that we could.
Well, I've been to Brazil, for example, and I have seen them use cassava in huge variety in different ways, making different products. One of the things that we can do, our universities, for example, University of the West Indies or some of the other universities in the Caribbean, can collaborate with some of the universities in Brazil, for example, where they can learn some of the techniques and, because that is what helps in the advancement of knowledge. When we have a collaborative attitude, we have to want that. We have to recognize that we don't know everything. No one person knows everything. But I can take my specialty, combine it with that of another person, and then we can put our heads together and we could develop products. We could come up with ideas. We could learn from one another. So I must recognize that, yes, there are efforts, and we have seen increases in the use of, for example, using dasheen to make cereals. I've seen that. Some of the local food producers here in Jamaica that export their product to U.S. market, they have significantly increased the quality of the product, the quality of the packaging. Some of these companies, I've worked with them to help them, directly or indirectly, by actually taking the students to some of these countries and have the students work with them to help to improve the product. And in the United States, I look at the product. I don't want to call companies names because I'm not here to advertise them.
And they're not paying.
But yes, we have made a lot of strides over the last 10, 15 years.
That is good to hear. I'm so sorry that we're out of time, Prof. But you've put us on a path of thinking this morning, and we must think about what we're thinking. This is just critical thinking at the end of the day. But you've put us on a path of rethinking and reimagining what our futures can look like, even as we lament over the New World Order and Mark Carney's speech at the World Economic Forum and food security and water security and so on. You've given us some practical ideas as to where we can go. I want to continue our conversation. So this is the first in our series because there's just so much knowing that you've got. And I know that our audience would like to hear much more from you. So if you're willing to, and I know you are, we invite you back. We'll talk with you on that to come in and share with us more of your knowledge in this particular field of, and I'm saying food safety, security, packaging, you name it, and sargassum. So should we pick up sargassum now and save them for you?
Well, the best sargassum to use would be the ones that you harvest from the sea itself, and not when it gets onto the beach, because when it gets onto the beach, then it picks up the sand and the dirt, gets contaminated, and so that's the best one.
I'm glad somebody's doing something about it, because goodness, wow, this is a problem. So thank you so much for your work, and thank you so much for choosing Jamaica.
You're very welcome. Very welcome.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor Melvin Pascal, and he'll be back with us, so don't you worry about it. He's at the University of the West Indies, working in this field for a very, very long time. He has assisted Jamaica.